Linwood, for you, coming from, news and from reporting, how do you feel that really has impacted the writing you do now?
Well, yeah, I spent 30 years working in newspapers, and so occasionally I've actually written things that sort of draw on experience of having worked in that world, but I think more than anything, having worked in newspapers has affected my work ethic and how I do what I do. You don't have the luxury. People are always, the first question writers often get asked at events is, what about writer's block? And I think, what's writer's block? Do plumbers get plumber's block? Do teachers get teacher? Why are we so special that of all the professions we can say, oh, I can't, I have the vapors, I can't work today. And so I get up in the morning and I just go to work. I just start working, because in newspapers, as a columnist, if you were to call your editor and say, I'm just not feeling it today, Let's say, well, don't feel it at another paper, So I think more than anything, it means I work quickly, and I treat writing not as a kind of sort of thing where you wait for the muse to strike. Writing is a job, and so when I'm writing a book, my goal is to sit down and do 2,000 words a day if I can do that, and so it's a job. And I work quickly, and so, for example, when I was involved in another project a couple of years ago with a guy named Martin Campbell, who, among other things, directed Casino Royale, and he wanted to make a 6-part series out of one of my books, and there would be these long phone calls where they would go through every page of the script and have changes. I'd be on a conference call, and so when I got off the phone, I would just do them and I would send it to them the next day, and they would say, "What are you doing?" Like they were expecting it in like a week. And I thought, how could anything like that take that long? And I said, this is the only way I know how to work. When you spent 30 years in newspapers and you're supposed to turn stuff around within minutes or at least hours, that's the only way I know how to work.
Wow. Yeah, fascinating. And Arturo, you've talked a little bit about how directing, I know Susan's talked about how acting has sort of influenced her work as a writer, and you've talked a little bit about documentary filmmaking influencing you, but I'm curious, in adapting this play into the screenplay, sort of once you figured out the structure of it and you had that dialogue, did you ever go back to the source material, or did you just let it become sort of the thing it was? Did you let the documentary aspect of it or the observing aspect of it take over?
I think so, yeah. I think, again, I call it more of an editing job. The play was very much a comedy, which I wanted to make a documentary that felt more like reality. So a lot of dialogue that was too comedic was cut, and it didn't pass the reality filter, let's call it.
Okay.
So everything was, on paper, everything was put through that filter. What doesn't sound real? What sounds like a joke? Which was great for a play.
Right.
Because it's a play and we all know that we're in a theater. But I wanted to emulate reality, like a real farm, and give it that drama that it's really happening.
Right.
So in that sense, that was the first thing we did on paper. And then with the actors, same thing, Everything is very dry. No one played the joke, quite the opposite, because it's hilarious. But it's hilarious when, I think in film, it works better when you don't push the joke. As in theater, you maybe have to give it a little push.
Right.
Right? So
yeah, sure.
I think those were the basic differences.
Yeah, and that sounds to me too like the experience of observing, watching it happen and letting the humor come out of that, as opposed to trying to make the humor happen.
Exactly.
Which also to me speaks a lot to your documentarian sensibility.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, and once you get used to shooting documentaries for many years, like I have, and editing some of them, you kind of get an ear for real dialogue.
Right.
And when you hear something that is written not as real, it kind of like something goes off in your ear. You're like, wait, what is this?
Yeah, you can snuff it out. Yeah, right.
But that must be interesting to go from doing a documentary a documentary, I guess you have to let it happen as opposed to making it happen.
Yes.
Whereas when you're doing something like that, you might feel more inclined with Drawer Boy to sort of make things happen. But if you, even with that kind of let it happen, it will feel more natural, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
And how do you balance, I'm curious, Susan, when you're working from source material, how do you balance, as you were saying before, when you're working with a classic, you really want to honor people's relationship to that book, say Anne of Green Gables or Charles Dickens, or our perception of Charles Dickens. How do you balance that with wanting your own voice to come through, or your own instincts and your rhythms as a writer? Like, are you conscious of that when you're writing, or are you really just inside of the material and letting it flow?
Well, I guess that's why I spend so much time kind of immersing myself in it. Then I hope that, again, like when you step out on stage and you think, well, this is my best version of the play and what I think the character is. But I did wobble a little bit with the Dickens one, because I thought, oh, you know, who am I to be writing about putting dialogue in Charles Dickens' voice? I was about a day of like anxiety, and then I thought, well, they're paying me.
It's not like he's going to complain.
No, he's not going to complain. That's too bad that he died.
What's he going to do?
That's right. Unless you start being haunted by the ghost of Charles Dickens'
I was
past.
feeling a little bit of that, but I was also like, you had your chance, so it's my turn now. You have to be a little bit irreverent at some point. You do have to, at some point. If you were slavishly faithful, it wouldn't probably be much good to the project. You actually do have to sort of step out at some point. But I like to know the moment when I'm, or at least I like it to be sort of organic, the moment where you think, okay, now I know why I'm moving this way, and I'm taking this, and I'm making this scene, and I understand the spirit of what I'm doing now. So I feel I can play now.
Right. Great. Yeah, because I suppose, like, I guess my question would be, what is your favorite part of adapting something from one form to another? What's the thing that gets you excited about it?
I'll say to one extent, some of the heavy lifting has been done in terms of the structure. Not as much as you'd think, because when you get in there, it's like, oh, I have to, it's actually, this will be a breeze.
Right.
But actually you find you have to make these bridges, you have to, you know, but at least it gives you an optimistic feeling that there's a beginning, middle, and end that you can, and you're not having to completely invent all that. And that if you love the material, then there's also that sense of feeling happy to go into that world every time when you sit down to write, and you think, well, it worked on paper. At least it's not just me here. There's things that I'm working with, and the material is there.
Great. Linwood?
I think two things I think that are really exciting. One is when you're writing it, you're seeing it. You know, like whether it's a book or whether it's a screenplay, when I'm writing it, it's playing like a movie in my head. I can see it's happening, and that part is great fun. And then the second part that's great fun is if it actually gets made, is seeing it actually happening. And you see this real set and these actual people, and they're actually saying these things that you wrote. And a lot of times, you know, I don't often have an exact image of the characters. I mean, I have a sense of them and so forth, but I don't actually see them as, oh, this guy looks like so-and-so or whatever. And then you see somebody saying those lines you've written, you think, they're perfect. Like that must be that sort of is, I think, how I saw it. But it's seeing it actually happen, and you think, yeah, it's like the dream's realized. You know, it's actually happened.
Yeah, that sounds so magical.
They're taking ownership as though they wrote it.
Yes. How dare they?
Right.
And they get their name on the poster figure.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah. So many good questions coming up. Arturo, do you have? What was your favorite thing?
I think to me it was a bit like remodeling a house. Like you already like the house, and let's say that you bought if you have some money, especially in Toronto, and then you get to paint the walls a different color. You get to make it beautiful, and you know that it's already there. It's already standing. So you're not really that responsible for it to fall or not, like what you were saying. The bones are there. But you still get to have so much fun and make it yours.
I love that analogy because that's how I often describe writing a novel, is that the first draft is putting the house up, and it's up, and it's you know, it's standing there, and then the second draft is going in and decorating the rooms and putting in the furniture and rearranging them and so forth. But even when someone adapts your work or takes it, I think it's, you know, you gave them the house, now they're kind of redecorating inside, but you still built the house. And even if they make some changes to it, you can still take ownership of it, that you did create that.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even be able to tinker with it if you had not created this thing in the first place.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's beautiful.